This show is being sponsored by the National Cooperative Bank, NCB. NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide through the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. More information on the power of community ownership in action can be found at ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. And now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
This is Vernon Oakes. We're here talking to you this morning about cooperatives, the benefits of cooperatives, the benefits for a particular community, the benefits of our U.S. economy, the benefits for people with funds and people that don't have very much money. The National Cooperative Bank, NCB, is sponsoring this program. The NCB's mission is to help cooperatives grow by supporting and being an advocate for American cooperatives and their members, placing special emphasis, listen to this, special emphasis on serving the needs of communities that are economically challenged. And all throughout the U.S., there are communities that are economically challenged, particularly minority communities, but they could be majority communities also. Today on the program, we have Jen Caruso. Good morning, Jen.
Morning, Vernon.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Great. Glad you're on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're quite welcome, and I'm anxious to hear some of the things that you have done. Tell me how you got involved with co-ops. How did you learn about them?
Oh, Vernon, we could talk for hours. As I'm realizing, as I look back, there's one of the themes I came up with for our talk today was the concept of things coming full circle. I guess technically I got my start in co-ops when I was 17, when I was able to open my first bank account. And I opened with the Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, which was a teacher's credit union. That both my parents were teachers. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because this credit union, which just, was a simple account, actually did put me on my way to building my own assets, building my own credit worthiness, extending me credit, making the first time I ever bought a car was a loan from the credit union. And this goes back, So then, anyway, went through life, attended Penn State University and studied philosophy with a focus on science, technology, and society, and somehow wound up in New Haven working for Greenpeace after school and wound up moving into the Rochdale Housing Cooperative on Elm Street in New Haven across from, I think it's called Rudy's. It was our little neighborhood bar. It was such a wonderful community. It was in downtown New Haven, and it was a housing co-op of, I would say, moderate income graduates and young professionals from all the universities and colleges in and around New Haven. So it was a really neat mix. But from there, I really got into sort of community education and organizing in focused on energy and in the environment, and particularly on the nuclear energy issues in New England and particularly Connecticut and Massachusetts. And at about that time, the many states, and including the state of Connecticut, was confronting the issue of restructuring the electricity market and opening up the market to competition. So a whole bunch of us, consumer advocates, environmental advocates, low-income consumer advocates, you name it, small business advocates, just cooperatives, got together and formed the Connecticut Energy Cooperative. So I would say that's how I really got my start. I was sort of a project coordinator with a number of other really great folks from Connecticut. Ultimately became a co-founder and the first staff person beyond the general manager in the co-op, and stayed there for a few years and moved on. And at its height, this co-op was a statewide 12,000 household members over 350 organizational members, meaning organizations who have memberships themselves, as well as, I want to say, over 75 small business and commercial and institutional members. And the co-op provided in the market in Connecticut, in this newly deregulated market, this co-op was the first licensed electricity supplier. This co-op was the first to provide a more affordable electricity option and the first 100% renewable electricity option.
Okay, Jen, let me stop you a minute.
Yeah.
You said a lot. First, I got my master's in mathematics from Penn State at College Park, so I like that environment.
Fantastic.
A lot of people don't understand that credit unions are cooperatives. And one of the reasons I think that's so is because credit unions don't advertise that as much. So I'm glad to hear at 17, 18, when you got into the credit union, you knew that it was a co-op and you took advantage of its products and pricing. Normally, but for the listeners, those of you that haven't heard the show before, a co-op is any business. Any business that you can think of, you can make into a co-op. There are two basic kinds. It's normally if the employees own it, it's called a worker co-op. And if the people that are buying the services or the products, the consumers own it, then it's a consumer co-op. And credit unions is a form of a consumer co-op.
Mm-hmm. And I would add, if a group of farmers own it, it's a producer cooperative. And the list goes on, and the variations are becoming more vibrant and interesting and innovative. But like you say, Vernon, the core concept, though, is that a cooperative, unlike any other business, is owned, controlled, and exists to benefit the members on a one member, one vote basis. And so be it a group of consumers who get together as depositors, they deposit their money together so that they can, in a credit union, so that they can collectively extend credit to each other by way of small lines of credit, maybe an auto loan, maybe a small business loan, maybe a mortgage. The credit unions are, as you might know, actually far outperforming banks, particularly in this economic crisis. So it's an incredibly important community asset.
And what I like about it, the co-op, again, it's any business, but it's formed to benefit the members and not necessarily the shareholders. In a capitalistic model, and what I learned in the business school is that the reason for the existence of the business is to give the shareholders a greater return on investment. So the ROI, the return on investment, was the main thing that was talked about in the MBA program, both the one that I went to at Stanford and the one that I ran at Howard University. It was always about return on investment. So the conversation and the decision and choices made was first and foremost what's best for the investor. And then more often than not, that investor did not live in the community where the business was. It may not even buy or use the products or the services. And they could even be, across the water somewhere in a different country. But it was about how do you benefit the investor, where the co-op, and one of the reasons I really like co-ops is designed, it's implemented. The reason for existence is both to solve a community problem and to benefit the members. So it's just different and wonderful. And that's the reason that the National Co-op Bank is sponsoring this program, to get more people to understand them, more people to perhaps want to form them and be a part of a cooperative. So then what I want to find out a little bit more about the Connecticut Energy Cooperative is, who owned it? Is this a consumer co-op or a worker co-op?
Yeah, Vernon, it was a consumer co-op, and you and I could certainly run through the post-mortem of this co-op that ultimately shuttered in 2002. 3. It was a consumer cooperative. It was distinct and unique in that it defined 3 classes of consumer members: household members, small business members, and organizational members. And it did that purposefully to ensure that there was a balance in interests, in voices, in leveraging the assets we have to work with, and I would say from this is the beauty, I think. Cooperatives have so many, I'll call them competitive advantages to any traditional capitalistic form of business, capital, based with a for-profit primary purpose, is that because cooperatives are organized to serve members, the members we're talking about are ordinary people. The members we're talking about are small businesses, could be municipalities. But the point is these are regular people coming together for common cause. There's there's a problem and an opportunity that they can only deal with
Jen,
together.
We have to come back to that and talk about everybody that can be a part of a member. And but if you have a question or comment and you want to be a part of this for either Jan or myself, please call in at 1-800-450-7876. We'll be right back.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
WOL's motto is information is power, and the National Cooperative Bank is bringing you this program about cooperatives. My name is Vernon Oaks. We're giving you information. Jan Caruso is my guest today. We're giving you information to help you to solve community problems, banding together, working cooperatively. National Cooperative Bank customers are cooperatives such as grocery, wholesale cooperatives, purchasing cooperatives, or housing co-ops. Any cooperative could be one of its customers, or any organization that share in the spirit of cooperatives, driven by democratically organizing principles. They could be Alaskan American or Native American enterprises. And their nature, they are member-owned, member-run. So you get all kinds of different organizations that can be cooperatives. And when we say cooperative, it's a legal structure, and sometimes even a community, a culture can work cooperatively. So, Jen, what we were talking about before we left off was that common everyday people can be a part of a cooperative where they can have control over the business, control over their life. Can you tell me some other kind of businesses that you have been involved in?
Yeah. Why don't we sort of pick up where, in a way, in the industry, in our region in the northeast of the U.S., this was sort of phase 2 of new age energy cooperative development. So out of all of the excitement and investment and education and awareness building and cooperative establishments that were formed in the late 90s and early 2000s, one of them is the Pioneer Valley Photovoltaic Cooperative, also known as PV Squared. So PV Squared was an effort to create quality, safe, secure jobs for workers in the solar system installation business. They started off very small and were supported by a number of organizations, including the Cooperative Development Institute, and supported by the state of Massachusetts Renewable Energy Trust. And let's see, I think, are we in 11 years later? They're, I believe, at 23 worker owners, all earning more than, if not a living wage, with a full set of benefits and enormous opportunity for professional development and learning, new skills, and this co-op is growing by leaps and bounds and still thriving despite the weak economy, the actual weak economy.
You said there's 23. How many people started the business? How many people were in the business when it started?
That's a little bit of a moving target, only because you might know, Vernon, how early organization goes. There's a bunch of people, and then there's fewer people, and then the right people. So I want to say they started with 4 to 5 core individuals. Mm-hmm. I think 3 to 4 of them are still three of them are still founding member owners. Sort of they're the elders at this point of this 11-year-old worker co-op.
So how much money did they put up?
Oh, I'm going to make a guess, and this is a guess based on these smaller worker co-op cooperative development efforts in these kinds of industries. I want to say $5,000 paid over time out of payroll, and or supported by a member equity loan from someone like the Cooperative Fund of New England.
So
it's definitely made to be possible, feasible for low-income individuals or low to moderate income individuals to come together and actually start, form, and capitalize a cooperative.
So we've just talked about the first 3 principles of the 7 principles of a modern cooperative, and the first one is voluntary and open membership. So you don't have discrimination. It doesn't make any difference of what gender you are, what nationality you are, what religion you are. Just those things just don't make a difference. The second one is democratic membership control. That's 1 member, 1 vote. And then members' economic participation. So I know that there has to be some form of member economic participation in order to have it to be a co-op. But we had Harriet May on, who was with a credit union in El Paso, Texas, and she said when it was started in 1932 or something, it was 11 members, $5 each. So here you have 5 members, $5,000 each, 11 years ago, which is probably comparable to the $5 in 1932. But I tell you, it's also nice, and I've seen this in housing co-ops, where that member participation, that buy-in, can be paid out over time. There's one that a Latin American family bought in $10,000 into this co-op. It's a 16-unit co-op, and they pay $200 a month until it's paid off, and it's paid off. Right. And so there's ways that a co-op can work so that everyday people without a lot of means, without a lot of money, can get into it and participate in this in a democratic. And that particular person is the treasurer of that co-op. We just met last night, and so very active, very much participating in the co-op, and fully paid. So, okay, those are the top 3. And so this co-op has grown from 5 people to 23, where 3 of the 5 are still original founders are still participating, and they install solar panels.
Yeah, and I want to say plus or minus.
Okay, I understand.
On those figures.
Okay. The fourth principle is autonomy and independence. And this one is a big one to me. The biggest one for me, the most important one to me, is the 5th one, which is education, training, and information. And you said it with this particular co-op, they have, not only do they have full benefits, they get salary plus full benefits, but they're always improving their skill set. And yes. This would be one of the things that a business that is run for the benefits of the members, one of the things would be trying to figure out how you can always get folks better educated with more skills, so that not only the cooperative can grow and give better service, but the individuals can also. So that's neat.
Right.
Neat. Okay. Anything else on that one? Any problems they had that they had to overcome?
Well, I guess I do want to underscore the importance of an often overlooked principle of autonomy and independence.
Mm-hmm.
Only because, the cooperative, let's call it the co-op community,
mm-hmm.
or collective cooperative history, or, let's call it, however in the United States and over time, and even particularly in the last 20 years. Community economic development often depends on grants, charitable donations, sponsorships, etc., investment. Doing any kind of small business development or affordable housing development requires capital. We're often challenged, or at least less now than 20 years ago. We're often challenged, and often it's a misperception that there is insufficient capital available that can be and will be controlled by the cooperative members.
So what I'm hearing you say, Jan, is that too often when somebody goes and gets a grant or a loan, the business or the organization that gives the grant or loan would put requirements on the co-op so that they don't have autonomy and independence.
And even if it's not legally binding, when you're working with a group of people and someone is the big contributor at the table, they influence and often unduly the group. And so that's just a note to say it's important that we remain mindful of that principle.
Well, this has become my second most important principle because of that. With Papa Sin from Senegal was on the program, and he said those people that are organizing it, and that would include the people with the money, have to have the wisdom
mm-hmm.
and the patience
mm-hmm.
to give the people at the table the opportunity to solve their own problems.
That's it.
So
you hit it on the head.
That
is
gets
the
to that
challenge of cooperative development today and every day and yesterday and tomorrow.
Because the people at the table, what he further said was they know the culture. They know the problem. They know the people involved. And so they
mm-hmm.
can solve the problem better than anybody else coming into that community. And so when there's a community problem, let the people in the community solve the problem. And he says, and his experience is, and my belief system is, that those people can solve the problem better than anybody else. And if there's anybody out there that has a comment on this or anything else that we've talked about, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876. And Jan, we have another minute before we take a break. Anything else on this subject?
Oh, goodness. Remember, I don't want us to not give full attention to member education and training. One of the most exciting and low cost, no cost ways that cooperatives, cooperators, our cooperative development folks are doing education and training is simply through peer-to-peer networks.
Okay.
And get together and have conversations about common issues.
We're going to come back and talk about training and peer-to-peer networks in a few minutes. We'll be right back.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Good morning again. This is Vernon Oaks talking to you about cooperatives and the benefits of cooperatives. The National Cooperative Bank is sponsoring this program. If you have any comments or suggestions or questions, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876. Excuse me. My guest today is Jen Caruso. Jen, what is your job now? What do you do? Where do you work at?
Well, since I Well, I am working part-time for the Cooperative Fund of New England as the Southwest Loan and Outreach Officer, serving Western Massachusetts, Connecticut, and the Hudson River Valley of New York. And in general, I think today I'm here as just a everyday cooperator.
Okay. All right. So you've seen a lot of co-ops in your time. You've seen a lot of co-ops developed?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us another one?
Yes. Yeah. And I've done this count, Vernon, and over the years, I think I've heard about, not just heard about, but actually talked with or made connection with, read about, discussed, brainstormed with, planned with probably 500 co-ops of all types, and in the majority of industries and sort of their sub-industries. But that makes me a generalist, and I have a lot of specialist friends. So let me tell you about another one. Let's see if we can keep with the energy one. Well, an interesting, and I think, we could talk trends, what's happening in the cooperative community, the cooperative economy, cooperative development, in cooperatives. There's all kind of facets. But one trend and a focus area is developing worker cooperatives, either through new startup enterprise or through business succession and conversion retention of established existing small businesses. Recently, and I had no part to play in this, except that I used to work for the Cooperative Development Institute for 8 years. The Cooperative Development Institute just helped three retail businesses in Stonington, Maine, convert to a worker co-op, making it the largest worker co-op in Maine now, with I can't tell you the number of employees, but let's just say it's the largest worker co-op now in Maine. And aside from the fact that worker co-ops are really generative, promote positive community development entities in and of themselves, the fact is this effort, these people kept their jobs and managed to gain ownership in the process and control and retain very important community assets in an isolated island, I believe, rural Maine community.
So they took three businesses, put it into one business, and the employees bought that business and now own it. Yes,
with a structured buyout, from the owners, a couple who, was clearly interested in retiring.
At Greenbelt Homes, I saw a sign that said, co-ops gives people the tools to control their own destiny. And another reason I like it is that now you have people that were employees, and in a retail business that perhaps is not a very stable job to have. Now they own it, and therefore they can make decisions that are better for the members and their customers. And therefore control their own destiny. The better services they provide, the better products they provide, the better that they'll have an opportunity to have a job, have a business, have a job, and provide for their families. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and if I didn't, this might be a facet of a trend, but I would say a key trend is protecting what we got. Land preservation, business retention, doing that all cooperatively through worker-owned co-ops, consumer-owned co-ops, producer and craftsman co-ops. Let's protect what we got. Let's sort of, I don't want to sound whatever, but the cooperative community has grown to such an extent that we can now not only call these things the worker cooperative movement or employee ownership movement or healthy food food cooperative movement or local food movement. Like, all of these movements are beginning to move together according to shared definition, principles, and values. And what that results in is increased trade and more control of our cooperatively controlled capital. And that capital is cash, that capital is land, that capital is, housing, that capital is business. That capital is what we should maintain as commons, not private in any way, shape, or form.
I want to tell you of another capital, and that's when we recycle. The Washington Post had an article on June 21st that said, talking about Velo City Bicycle Cooperative, which is at 2111 Mount Vernon Avenue. It says the friendly spirit of the neighborhood is in high gear at Velo City, which takes donated bikes, then rehabs and sells them and their parts for a good price. You fix your own bike with the help of experienced volunteers, and you use the shop's tools and supplies for just $10 an hour. Everyone helps everybody here, said volunteer Joe Brown. Joe Brown said also that I live near Skyline, which is a neighborhood, and I'm over here all the time. I wish we had something like this in Skyline. So this is a group of people coming together, taking donated bikes or bikes that are thrown out and rehabbing them and selling them for a good price. So here we have there's a need for bicycles in any urban area to keep the traffic down. So there's a community need, and then there's a lot of bikes thrown out, and so they get these bikes, fix them up, and sell them for a good price. And they also help people to fix their own bikes. It's just fascinating, and it's a co-op. So
yes, and that's where folks are. It's really exciting times, Vernon, because not only can we speak about a true cooperative economy here in the U.S., which is, I would argue is fairly new, but we can point to this organic explosion of cooperative application, sort of applying the cooperative definition, values, principles to all kinds of things that are core issues like transportation, and in ways that are done, on a bootstrap basis or extremely resourceful basis. And all communities participate. All communities can participate. We're figuring out how to help all communities participate. We're figuring out together. There's a long way to go, I tell you, but I want to give a shout out to Jessica Gordon-Nemhard, who used to be there down in University of Maryland Democracy Collaborative, who I believe now is in New York. She's with a number of really outstanding co-ops and organizations, one of which is the GEO Collective, geo.coop, grassroots economic organizing. There you can read about Jessica's new book, Collective Courage. And I'm looking quickly for the subtitle, but if you need to take
it is
a break,
Collective
Vernon.
Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Thought and Practice.
Yes.
She was here in this area, I think on June the 3rd. But she was here recently talking about the book. I did meet her at another program here a couple of months ago at the University of Maryland and bought a copy of the book. But her last name is Nembhard. So if you want to look that book up, Collective Carriage, A History of African American Cooperative Thought and Practice.
Great. So we're learning. I guess the point there, Vernon, is full circle. We're learning from the past. We're learning from our grandparents, again, how to live ordinary, simple lives where we take care of ourselves and each other. And doing it under and doing this in communities where there is true oppression of all sorts.
I want to repeat what I heard, make sure I heard it, is that the what's coming around full circle is this cooperation where we're taking care of each other.
Yeah, it's not a new concept. Cooperative economics grew right up along, capitalism and communism. This is old stuff.
Well,
hundreds of years. And so we're not only coming full circle in the sort of root reasons cooperatives were formed internationally and in the U.S., often in African American communities. That's where a lot of American roots in cooperation exist. And so not only are we sort of going full circle in terms of learning from our past, we're going full circle in terms of learning simply from the way perhaps our grandparents or great-grandparents looked at the world and functioned in the world, sort of getting back to basics. Getting back to basics, maybe, and being interdependent and resourceful, building it for ourselves, figuring it out ourselves together. I think that's the advancement, though, is that, I guess information technology, transportation technology has made it possible for this, let's call it, and the economic and environmental and the social crises has made this possible, this boom of grassroots economic organizing by way of all kinds of different models, but cooperatives are a tried and true.
Well, speaking of Jessica Gordon Nimhard book, there's another guy named David Thompson out of California. He's a British guy. He's the one that's taught me a lot about because he's writing a book also on the cooperative influence on the civil rights movement. And so talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, Nannie Helen Burroughs, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Jo Baker, all of these people, Harry Belafonte, he told a story that Harry Belafonte tried to rent an apartment in New York, and this was in the 50s, and he was denied because of the color of his skin, so he sent his agent in who got the lease. Harry Belafonte signed it. He moved in. They didn't even know about it until much later. Then he bought the building and made it into a co-op. So I've been trying to reach out to Harry Belafonte to see if we can get him on the program, but we're going to take a break again. And if anybody out there would like to call in at 1-800-450-7876. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. This is Vernon Oaks on Everything Cooperative. Jan, there is a website in the D.C. It's called coopdc.org. That's coopdc.org. There's a lady by the name of Joanna Bachman that seems to manage this site, and they put up anything that's going on in the D.C. area about co-ops goes up on this blog in this website. So if anybody would like information about what's going on in co-ops around the D.C. area, and there's a list of co-ops, co-op directory there. There's resources, a calendar. So you could go on coopdc.org to get information about what's going on about co-ops in the D.C. area. And so I would encourage, Jan, that if other areas might want to create their own website to put up information about what's going on in their particular area about co-ops. Yeah. And there's a lot going on in New England, as I'm beginning to find out.
Yeah, and Vernon, this is one of there is a few websites I wanted to make sure I plugged while I was on the line.
Okay.
One of them is find.coop, FIND.COOP. I give you that one because, as far as we can tell, that's one of the best, most comprehensive entryways to get in touch with and find co-ops. And that'll also take you to the Data Commons Cooperative, which is an actual co-op that is managing cooperative data. So as they grow, more information and knowledge will be able to be gathered from this directory or directories of directories on co-ops. I'd also point people in the D.C. area. It's a national organization, but they are in D.C. and they serve. The point in the right direction is the National Cooperative Business Association, NCBA.coop. And I would be completely remiss if I didn't first and foremost point to the International Cooperative Alliance, ICA.coop. There, you can read the international statement on the cooperative identity, which is essentially a one-pager that completely defines and has stood the test of time in terms of defining what is a cooperative by values, by principles, by definition.
Well, I just went to the web page, and I thank you for that one. I did not know about this find, FIND.coop. It's in English, Spanish, and French, so you can get any language you want, possibly, or any language
Vernon,
you may understand.
I should say, Vernon, that is not to devalue the DC network, because the fact is the way co-op development or co-op organizing works is from the ground up. So the locals know what's happening. Mm-hmm. The better we learn to feed the information upward, so that we can, work together and share knowledge and wisdom and information and experiences and models, the better.
Well, it says on here that together we are the Data Commons Cooperative. We share our data with each other and the public to build a stronger base of information and grow our movements. So they're encouraging everybody to pitch in and share. And I would not at all be surprised if Joanna Bachman hasn't already put the coopdc.org in with this group.
I hope so. Go, Joanna.
She has been on the program. She's a sociology professor, I think, at George Mason University. But also Michael Bell has been on. About 4 people from NCBA. I'm glad you plugged NCBA because they do a lot of good work in the U.S. and around the world. I'd mentioned Papa Sin. He works for CLUSA, NCBA CLUSA, and we've had a couple other people that work for NCBA on the program. And they just do a lot of good work, and I get inspired every time I talk to them about what they're doing and where they're doing this work at. And also the Federation of Southern Co-ops that goes Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, all that southern, and a lot of farmers, and most of which are African-American farmers, and how coming together. And you mentioned producing co-ops with farmers come together and they produce and they sell their goods, but also they have another arm that's a purchasing co-op where they purchase their goods together and get them by a bigger volume and at a lower price. And one guy from Claudia, just lost his name right now, from Federation, said that in the 50s and 60s when blacks were trying to vote, the white farmers would not sell black farmers. The whites that sold gasoline would not sell it to black farmers. That if they were trying to get people to vote, and so they formed a co-op just to purchase gas.
Right.
And they went to different states. You may have to buy a truck or whatever it takes, and people pool their limited resources together so they can work together. They could buy gas, and then they could go vote. So
yes.
it's always interesting to me how people that want control try to control the vote. And so we in the African American experiences, as most people that have been depressed or deprived find out, you have to be able to vote. And I just wish that younger people would understand this so that they would take the privilege that people have died to get, and that is to go out and vote. And I believe, this is a hypothesis of mine, is that when people understand co-ops and they grow up in co-ops, they understand the value of voting more so than if they don't have the experience of the cooperative experience.
Yeah, and I would say most importantly, they believe that their voice has impact. The one thing I would say, of all the things, I mean, believe me, I learned a lot of things in the years that I was forming and with the Connecticut Energy Co-op more about the energy industry than, most people would,
ever want to know.
Ever want to know.
Okay.
And the one thing I came away from that experience with was, man, there's nothing like living through an experience, having an experience to learn what's what. And so how was I connecting that back?
Well, that is the way you learn, and you learn about the value of voting. Is once you live it, and that's why if you have an experience in co-ops, you're living it, and therefore you know, not only do you believe that your vote counts, you know your vote counts.
Yes.
And you'll go vote.
Now, I have to say, I'm unfortunately, I'm fairly cynical about our current system. That's just me. I wind up spending all my time working with building co-ops, my co-op, networks, my co-op people, building the social human capital of cooperation. That's where I'm putting all my energies. I was thinking just for the first time today, man, maybe it's time that we can actually put forth a viable third option that's based on cooperative values and principles at the national, state, local levels.
Somebody, and I think it was somebody from NCBA, and I'm missing the name right now, but talking about El Salvador, said that as they brought people through the co-op experience, they learned about it, that if you look at the mayors of a lot of cities in El Salvador, they are cooperators. And so one way would be starting a third party on cooperative principles, and another way would get in, and one of the parties, Democratic or Republican, and influence them. Because I was at a meeting in New York, and the candidate that got up there said that they know they cannot get elected without the cooperative in New York. You get enough experience. And so I just quickly, we're running out of time. I told you it's going to go by real quick. We only have a couple more minutes. The sixth principle is cooperation among cooperatives.
Yes.
And the seventh one is the one we consistently talk about, and that's concern for community. It's in the DNA of a cooperative because they're formed to solve a community problem. And and almost every last one of them that I've talked with, there's this piece of environmental issues, that making sure that whatever is done is friendly to the environment, friendly to the community. So I can't see how anybody would not like co-ops unless you are 1%er or somebody like that, where you know that you're making money like apartment owners, and HUD spends most of their money on apartments, and the people that own those apartments for the most part are the people that have money. And the experience, if we could get HUD to look at the experience of their co-ops, they'll find out that their money has been better spent, particularly over the long term. But it's better spent day in and day out. But over the long term, it's phenomenal. And we're always trying to get in front of HUD or politicians to tell a story.
Yeah. And, I don't want you to get me wrong. It's funny that I framed it like, I wonder if, because the fact is I already know that. There are cities who are where elected officials are pro-co-op. New York City, Jackson, Mississippi, Austin, Texas, Springfield, Massachusetts, Boston. I might be going out of my knowledge base.
Jen, we have 1 more minute, so any main points you want to get to the audience? Well, mine is just go co-op.
Go co-op.
Know more about co-ops. Go co-op. It solves problems. We've already talked to you. If you have a community problem, whether it's jobs or whatever it may be, then one way of getting a group of people together and forming a business to solve that problem.
Yes.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'll just end by saying that co-ops give me great hope, great faith, great positivity, great optimism, great power, personal power.
And we got to go.
And you got to go.
Thank you so very much, Jan, for being on today.
Thanks, Vernon.
All right. Have a good day.
1450 WOL.